Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and I am honored to be talking to Adam from Niche Website Builders. He has a pretty awesome case study story where he purchased a site and about 38 days later, he sold it and he made $18,000. And that's not even including the profit from the website while he owned it and the revenue. So we're going to go through all the details, the things that he changed, the things that he updated to improve the revenue, and then just generally how he flipped the site so quickly. It sounds like a fake clickbait headline, but it's real. Adam, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks, Doug. Very good, thanks. How are you?
Doing awesome. We were just chatting before, and the weather's good here. The sun's shining. We just got through with a few storms yesterday. So, yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to going outside later when we finish up talking. And anything new on your end over there?
No, no. As I mentioned, we were buying a house and selling a house, and all of the paperwork and hassle that comes along with that. But apart from that, no, nothing too much.
Very cool. Well, congrats on the new place and hope everything goes well. I know it's a real headache to deal with all the various professionals that come across your just your interaction dealing with the builder and the sellers and all the agents and brokers or whatever. So good luck on that.
Cheers, Doug.
We will get into the details here. And you bought this site back in January. So January 29th of this year, 2021, and then you sold it March 8th. So that is 38 days total. So can you just lay out the site and just kind of tell us, of course, you won't reveal the URL, but can you just tell us like where you found it and some of the details, some of the criteria when you were looking at acquiring this site?
Yes. So, in all honesty, I didn't actively look for this site. I put up, or this site specifically, I put up a couple of posts in the flipping website Facebook groups, saying that I was looking for a site in this space. And then a couple of weeks later, just somebody messaged me out of the blue to say he had this site. Would I be interested in taking a look? And I mean, 9 times out of 10, when that happens, the site is nothing that you're looking for. Like I'm quite specific when I would say I'm looking for a website, it has to have certain things. And then 9 times out of 10, when people message you out of the blue like that, it has none of those things. But this one was different. It was a great website. It was monetized primarily through display revenue, even though it was in a product-based niche, which I thought was interesting, kind of like a different take on the niche. The owner wasn't the first owner of the website, but he hadn't really added any new content, and all of the content had been written by the previous owner, who was the guy that had built the website, and he was an expert in the field. So the content was really well written. It was kind of written with passion, and you could kind of see that based on the monetization. There was affiliate income, but it wasn't the main focus. The main focus was providing really useful informational content, which I liked. So we started talking, we started negotiating, and initially we couldn't come to an agreement on the price. Rightly so, the buyer was looking for a higher multiple than normal, based because the content was really good and written by a professional. And we went back and forth. I think it was probably about 5 or 6 weeks, and I was trying to get creative with the deal and offer different structures up. And in the end, I kind of forgot about it. And then he came back to me and said, "Okay, and let's do a deal for cash." And we kind of closed the deal. So the 29th of January is when I had the closing statement through from escrow. So that's the day that everything kind of finalized.
And it's kind of funny just from a negotiation standpoint. So you just forgot about it, and then the person was sort of sweating, realizing that, maybe he or she wasn't going to be able to sell elsewhere, and then came back and said, "Fine, I'll take your terms." Is that about right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic being on that side, because you've got a couple of different things going in your favor. In that if they sell direct to you, they don't pay any brokerage fees. Like I make it clear from the start that I've bought and sold dozens of sites, so it's a fairly painless and easy transaction. I'm willing to use escrow, and 9 times out of 10, I'm willing to pay the full escrow price myself. So it kind of, it makes it a no-brainer for them. And I also say that I'm willing to close quite quickly. Like if we can do a deal straight away, like my due diligence process, I can have it done within 1 day. So like I've, when you're negotiating from that perspective, whereas listing with a broker and they take a couple of days and then they get it live on their platform and then people want to do their own due diligence and it can be weeks. So having that as an advantage typically sways it, but in this case, not quite, because this went back and forth for weeks, and yeah, I just kind of forgot about it. And then for whatever reason, he came back and said, let's do something.
And I think that point about the broker fees is a big one, right? Because it's somewhere between like 10 and 15% usually.
Yeah, yeah, and there's pros and cons of working with brokers. They've got the buyer list essentially, so if you go to them, they can genuinely negotiate a higher price for you, like a higher multiple typically. But then you've also got to take off their fees, which in essence reduces that multiple down to a more standard level. And then the time as well, because they can't work on a 24-hour turnaround. You end up having to pay 50% of the escrow fee. I know it's a lot, but it's still like every little bit helps, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and we can share the purchase price, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's just a tad under $37,000.
And that was a 32x multiple, which is, I would say, that's competitive and reasonable. I mean, if you're getting around, I would say like 25 to 35x monthly profit, that's probably in the right range given a number of different factors, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think things are starting to go up now. Like the average multiples just seem to be going up and up, especially on like content-based sites. It definitely feels like it's a seller's market right now. The stock of high quality websites seems to be very low, and we have the benefit of speaking to lots of our client base within our business who are looking for these kind of websites, and honestly, they're struggling to find good quality websites right now. So it's definitely a seller's marketplace.
I think that's been the trend for the last, I mean, few years really, and I guess it's more money in the industry. People are saying, hey, this could be a good investment vehicle. It's separate from, some of the standard areas that folks are investing. So, okay, very cool. And you mentioned a couple things I want to dig into, and we will talk about every single one of the actions that you went through to increase the earnings. But number one, you said there was a specific niche that you were looking for. Can you elaborate on that? Like, were you just know it's a hot one? Why were you interested in that niche for this acquisition?
Yes, in all honesty, I was interested in that specific niche because I thought I'd already had, well, for two reasons. One is I bought an expired domain in that space, and I was looking primarily for a site which was a lot smaller than this, that had lots of good quality content, but on a weak domain. And I was going to move the content over to my expired domain. Um, but then after doing some more exclusive due diligence on my domain, which is Rule 101, if you listen to everything we talk about, I actually found that there was a trademark issue. So I didn't want to use the domain. So I was all in the process of acquiring another site in this space. And I was just looking to buy another complementary one so I could merge them together to merge the content. Um, just so happened that this one was quite a bit bigger than what I was looking for. But in all honesty, size doesn't matter sometimes. So this worked out well in the end.
Okay. And then you talked about the criteria that you typically look for. Sounds like it's apart from the niche specific. So, can you share some of the criteria you look for when you're trying to find a site to buy?
Yes, and it's changed over the last couple of months with the updates, Google updates. So I'm not buying sites anymore that have a higher ratio of commercial to informational content. Like for me, an ideal site would be 20 to 30% commercial and the rest informational. Um, Depending on the project. So in this instance, I was just looking for a weak site that had lots of good quality content. It didn't really matter too much about traffic or revenue or anything like that. I was just looking to very quickly jumpstart content by moving it onto a better domain. So my criteria for this was a little bit different if I was just looking to acquire a site to grow. Um, but if I'm looking for a site to grow, then I'm looking for a couple of other things in terms of um, is the traffic coming from Google first and foremost? Is it coming from the US in Google, which you can check in analytics? I'm looking for distribution across the top pages. I don't want any kind of one page to get more than 10 or 15% of the traffic because it's a risk. I'm looking at history within Ahrefs and SEMrush to see if there's been any, it's been hit with any updates, it's been hit in any algorithm updates. I mean, has it been on a downward trend in terms of keywords? Because that's traffic is sometimes a bit of a lag. Like you can be losing keywords out of the top 100 and not see traffic decreasing straight away. So kind of always try and marry the two up together. And then just is it a niche that I think I can do more with? My thinking around niche selection is changing and has changed again quite a bit over the last couple of months. Predominantly now I'm thinking of niche selection in a four-phase kind of like structure. So phase one is, can I build an audience based on question-based content? So if you think of the marketing funnel, you've got top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. Can I find enough top of the funnel questions to bring in a wide audience that are interested in this topic? And can I monetize them with display ads? That's phase one. Phase two is, are there any digital products out there that I can promote, i.e. courses, communities, or because the commission tends to be quite high. And then that leads on to phase three then, is once I've tested proof of concept by promoting other people's products in that space, can I build my own course or product or community? And then phase four then comes at the very end, is can I then monetize that audience in a customer to business perspective, i.e. can I build a directory or can I build a platform where I can connect my audience to businesses directly and either take a cut of the commission or charge for sponsored listings if it was a directory style layout. And that's the way I'm now approaching my niche selection, rather than is this a good product I can promote on Amazon, for example.
In looking at the things that you changed and updated, it looks like you stayed very much on the early phases, didn't even look
Yes.
too far past that. Now, the other part is you spent 38 days on this and putting all the pieces together. It sounds like you were getting a down payment for your home or something like that. You wanted some cash, a little cash infusion. So I'm curious, did you have a timeline in mind for flipping this site?
No, in all honesty, I didn't. There was nothing intentional about flipping it so soon. I think I sent you over the Ahrefs chart afterwards, from after I sold it. And in all honesty, I probably should have held it for a little bit longer. I should probably still be holding it right now. But you're right. I saw some nice quick turnaround. I could then redeploy that capital into new sites and take the profit and use it as down payment on a house, and actually bought some cryptocurrency. And if that's good or bad, I don't know. We'll soon see. But yeah, there was no specific timeline.
Okay, cool. And for the people listening on the podcast, the Ahrefs graph and generally the keywords, the organic keywords, organic traffic, it's growing still. And this is good to see because I hear many stories where someone buys a site and then something negative happens. So it's good to see that like people buy sites, they take off, like they weren't sort of tricked or misled in any way. So I'm glad to see that the new owner is probably thrilled and they think they're a genius for buying it from you at the price they did. So you win, you got your cut. That person is getting some nice benefits from the work that you've done. So let's ramp into the things that you changed. And you listed these in a specific order. And I'm curious, are they sort of in the order that you think is most important as far as the impacts, or is it kind of just random?
Um, uh, they are kind of listed in order based on like groupings. So the top parts are all to do with on page, and then the bottom parts are all to do with like technical changes.
Hmm.
In all honesty, the method that I took with this website was to increase display revenue. So I wasn't really interested in increasing affiliate revenue much. I knew that there were very quick wins that I could take on the display revenue side of things. So all of the methods that I've outlined and we'll talk about are there to predominantly increase um, page views in the short term and also RPM as well to get a higher revenue from display ads.
Awesome. Okay. And we could just run down the line here. We'll hit the on page first. So, number one, you increase the font size. So, tell us about that. Like, seems like a small change, but what was the font size before? What did you increase it? What was the logic behind it?
Yes, so I don't actually remember what the actual font size specifically was, but the first couple of points we'll talk about is all about increasing the number of adverts that you can fit on a page. So we talk about increasing font size, talk about increasing or adding more paragraphs, adding some new content, typically in the style of FAQs, and then adding more images. And what that does is specifically adds more page breaks or places in that one piece of content where display ads can go. So by adding in 3 or 4 images and adding a couple more paragraphs and making the font bigger and adding some more content, you're effectively just adding more opportunities for ad placements, and more ad placements typically means higher RPM.
Got it. And do you know what the new font size was? Just curious.
Yeah, I think it was 18. So I went.
Okay.
It may have gone from 16 to 18. It's not a significant jump, and it's like not one word on the page, but it was like 2 or 3 points bigger.
Okay. That's a thing that I've pointed out for a few years because I would land on sites and now sometimes the resolution on our monitors is pretty huge compared to what it used to be. So I would land on someone's site and their font size would be, whatever, 14. And it's trended larger, I think, because of the resolution that we have these days. So the DPI makes a difference and all that stuff. All that to say, I would just land on people's sites and just visually it looks awful because the font's so small, the paragraphs are huge, and there's too many words on a line. And I'm no designer, but just aesthetically it didn't look quite right. So anyway, I would say like at a minimum like 18 to 20 for most sites. And I have seen sites where it's trending a little too big, like if it's 23 or something like that. But anyway, small thing. All right. You talked about FAQs and you guys did some work for me, niche website builders. And I think you updated like 8 posts or so. And I went back and after about, I want to say it's about 6 weeks, I saw a 200% increase in traffic, which is obviously a huge amount. So I'll be covering that in an upcoming episode, getting into a few more of the details there. But what is the approach at Niche Website Builders for FAQs? I know it's not just finding FAQs, there's a little more strategy with it.
Yeah, 100%. And there's two strategies for our FAQ method. So the first strategy is updating existing content, which is what we did for you, Doug, and the approach I took on this website, where essentially we use a tool called Inlinks. It's created by Dixon Jones, the guy that created or ran Majestic. It's a great tool. It's a great piece of software, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on because I also use that for some advanced schema. But essentially, what Inlinks does is allow you to run either the website or specific pages through the Google NLP algorithm. And Dixon has also built his own NLP algorithm that's based on Wikipedia. So I asked him why he'd done that, and the reason that he said was Google's NLP algorithm is it's notorious for being strict. So if the content is if the content is not super related to the entity that it thinks it is, then it won't pull out. It won't say that it's about that entity. Whereas Dixon created a less strict version, and then for his entities, he used the Wikipedia pages because they have a page on everything essentially. So what you can do is you can run individual pages through this algorithm, and it spits out the entity. And I'm conscious that not everyone knows what that is, but essentially it's just think of it as a noun, like a describing word to describe the topic of that page. So it spits out all the describing words for that page. And then we have a process where we mine Google's people also ask box for questions that Google think are related to those entities. And the methodology or the theory behind it is, rather than us trying to guess what questions or what FAQs we think are relevant, why don't we ask Google what they think are relevant and kind of reverse engineer their own system? And then we pull out those questions. Typically, we'll run them through Ahrefs or SEMrush, but they don't always have them in the database, mainly because they are very long tail and they're questions that only Google think are relevant. Like they don't have massive volume, but they are hyper relevant. And then we add those to the piece of content. We mark them up with FAQ schema, and that's the one approach of updating existing content. So the other aspect to our FAQ service is where we don't update existing content, but we create new standalone content. And we do that by taking a more holistic view of the website. So rather than run individual pages through the algorithm, we'll put the whole website through there and spit out the seed topics or the seed entities. And these are high level stuff. And then we dig a little bit further into those and create a list of what we think are related based on those entities. And then from there, we mine literally thousands of questions from people also asked. We then run them through, well, first of all, we remove the duplicates. And also, which is super important, we remove the ones with duplicate intent. And that's quite easy to, I say easy to, you just need a bit of Excel skills, because what you'll find is two questions can be, have the same intent but worded slightly different. So just a remove duplicates wouldn't pick them up. But when we are mining all of the questions, we're also mining the little snippet of text that Google puts underneath the people also asked each question. And if Google thinks it has the same intent, typically it'll show the same snippet of text. So we're then also removing duplicates based on that snippet, so we don't duplicate the intent. And then from there, we cluster them together based on common URLs in the top 10. And what we typically then end up with is a primary question, followed by several sub-questions. And then depending on how many sub-questions will depend on the word count of those pieces of content. So there's support and informational pieces of content that are all based around questions, typically anything from 800 words up to 1,500 words. And we find that this is a super awesome way of one, driving traffic, because they are long tail questions. They're typically low competition. Typically, we're up against forums or Reddit for the results for those. And secondly, on that aspect, about 80% of people also ask questions are also eligible for featured snippets. So it's almost like featured snippet gold mine, really. So it's great for that. And then it's also great for building topical relevance with Google, because what better way to show Google that you're an authority on the topic by literally taking the questions that they think are relevant, answering them in a concise way, and then also internally linking them together to almost create this web of knowledge that's on your website essentially, and you mirror in what Google shows is relevant. So that's the two different approaches that we have for our FAQs.
And for a couple of the other items here, well, actually, is there anything else to add with the FAQs before we move on to some of the other points?
Well, I guess the only other thing to say is if you're gonna spend time doing them, is to make sure that you're marking them up with the correct schema. It's beneficial for two reasons. One is it's not a tangible benefit, but I think it's really important. Basically, you are handing Google on a silver platter exactly what the page is about. You tell them this is question and answer based content, and it's in a structured format that they can understand. And the second point of that is when the page gets on page one of Google, typically it has to be on page one to activate. But with FAQ schema, then you activate the FAQ box that appears under your search result, which gives you a little bit more real estate space, increases your click through rate, which um, you can actually see that in Search Console because you can break down in Search Console the clicks and impressions by FAQ rich result. And it's interesting to see that when we do this to existing content, we go into Search Console and we have a look at the average click through rate on a URL before we add it, and then the click through rate on a URL afterwards. And almost always it increases because we just add in that extra feature to the search to give it more visibility.
And technically doing that, is it a lot of work to add the FAQ schema?
No, not really. You can do it in a couple of ways. So plugins like Yoast and Rank Math actually have inbuilt Gutenberg blocks now. We can literally add the block, put in the question and answer, and it generates the schema. We typically don't like to use those only because we don't ever want to be tied into a product. So you can use any, if you just type in FAQ schema generator, there's a ton of websites which allow you to generate the schema, and you literally just paste in the question and answers. It generates a little script for you. We use a plugin, insert header and footers, to allow us to insert that script on each blog post, and that's it. And then once you've done, you can check if you've done it correctly by using Google's rich snippet testing tool, and they'll tell you on there. You'll come up green and it's eligible for FAQ schema. And then once you publish it live or you've updated it, within a week or two, you should see the pages start to appear in Search Console. A little box will appear for FAQ on the side in the schema section, and you can go in and see how many pages are valid. And then if you go into the performance report in Search Console, once those pages are activated, you can select the filter to only look at FAQ rich snippet data.
Got it. Okay. FAQs, yeah, it's a great way to add content, get those long tail keywords, and then the specific topical relevancy as well. So I encourage people to check it out. And I mean, they could even test it just to see if it works on a small scale and a few posts on their site. So moving back into, I guess, getting more ads on the each page, you also added more images to the top posts. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, in all honesty, these were just stock images. They weren't anything special. I didn't edit them. Based on Google's most recent update or the guidelines they put out, I probably should have at least added a banner with a website URL on them to make them unique. But I didn't. I just literally went to Shutterstock, downloaded a couple that looked relevant, and just added them in. And that works in a similar fashion to adding content, essentially just adding more paragraphs and more spaces for ad slots to appear.
Perfect. Yeah, and I guess the ideal situation is uniquely taken photos that you've taken yourself,
Yeah.
and they're actually like real pictures of the product or some activity or something like that. But you do what you can, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. I think going forward, maybe add in a banner or something with a URL on there just to, so from a machine perspective, from an algorithm perspective, it looks unique. I think that might do the trick until Google gets a little bit smarter and figures out that's maybe what's going on.
Right. And I think you could probably do this in Canva for free. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there are, I know on a Mac, you can set up some like automation things where you resize images, maybe put text and do some like custom image editing, but you can do it all like in a batch format where the machine's doing it,
Yeah.
not you, and just really save a lot of time. Or you could hire someone on Upwork to do it on Canva for, relatively inexpensive. So, all right. You also added some affiliate CTAs for some of the informational posts. So that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. I found it interesting when you talked about the site, how it was a product-based niche and they mostly had informational content. And it seems like they just missed the opportunity. And it looks like you didn't add too much in there too, although you didn't have the site for too long. But why do you think that is? Did they just follow a a framework that said publish informational content and don't worry about affiliate? Like I don't get it.
In all honesty, no. I think it generally was a passion project for the original owner. Um, so I and I'm assuming in that instance, they would rather write a how-to or give some specific guidance on the topic rather than a list of 10 of the best products in the space for something else. So there definitely were some of those posts on there, but the majority was just helpful, informational content, and you could tell it was written by someone who had a great knowledge of the topic, essentially.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, big opportunity for the new owner, I would say, if they're able to keep the amount of affiliate content down while still adding the opportunity to sell physical products or
Yes.
digital products or whatever applies.
Well, that was so when I saw the site, I put together almost a little pack on what I would do next. And this it's the same methodology that I was looking for with the expired domain, in that I would still look for a website that had high quality best of guides and move them over and look to merge the site. Um, and it's a quick win, like I say. There'd be no reason why you couldn't at least match the display revenue with affiliate income by doing that.
Very cool. You also added a table of contents plugin, I suspect, for jump links. So that's kind of an easy win. And anything interesting with that?
No, not really. I use Lucky WP. It's a free plugin for that. I've tested both having the table of contents visible and hidden on a post by default. There doesn't really seem to be any difference. Google seems to understand whether it's open or closed. So by default, I almost always have it closed now because I think it's better for user experience. And also, interestingly, when I added that, Mediavine told me to take it off, which was interesting because or at least hide it, because they said it would affect ad revenue if somebody came on the top and then saw a heading, maybe three-quarters of the way down. I just clicked in, they jumped there. They would miss all of the ad spots in between. So hidden by default seems to be the way to go.
Yeah. And I think, the user experience, of course, like it's nice to have the option. And I have seen some table of contents where it's really long. It's maybe a little too detailed, but it is funny that Mediavine said, you know what, we would hate for the user experience to be good. We want to show that. I mean, they earn money when they show ads, so I get it. I do understand, but they're like, oh yeah, we definitely don't want to make it convenient for someone to find the information on the page. Why would we do that?
I'm glad they told me though, because in all honesty, like I said, I tested the open and close from a kind of a ranking perspective, but it never even crossed my mind that it would affect display revenue for people jumping down until they mentioned. And yeah, that was really, I thought that was interesting. They mentioned it.
So close by default sounds good.
Yes. Yeah.
Next, we have Breadcrumb Navigation, which I like a lot. I mean, I think it's a helpful way for someone to navigate to other parts of your website, and it just makes sense. I know a lot of the SEO plugins will do this for you. Is that what you did on this site?
Yeah. So most themes actually have it built in. This one was just turned off. I think it was more important on this site typically than the sites that we normally build, because normally our site hierarchy is very flat. We don't use a hard silo method where there's category, subcategory, and post in the URL, whereas this website did. So I thought it was quite important to have that laid out in the breadcrumb at the top. Um, Otherwise, I mean, it probably had minimal impact, but I just did all these things in the space of a day, and I don't know which one had the biggest impact, but it's kind of all best practice, really.
Okay, great. And I think overall that covers the majority of the sort of on page, non linking situation. So we'll
Yeah.
move, although I guess technically the breadcrumb navigation is internal linking, which is the next topic here. So you added a lot more internal linking to some pages. Can you tell us about that a bit?
Yeah. So interestingly, the tool I talked about earlier, InLinks, when you run your pages through there, they actually have an option to to do the internal linking for you as well as add schema, which we'll talk a little bit about later on, I guess. But um, there's good and bad points about this. The good points are they make it really easy. Literally, you tick the pages that you want them to add all the internal links, and similar to what Link Whisper does, they find them and then they add them to the post. The only downside is unlike Link Whisper, when you stop paying the subscription for inlinks, the internal links are then removed. So um, you can have the best of both worlds. I.e., they'll show you what the internal links are. It's just a little bit of a pain that you then have to go and manually insert them, and that way, then if you ever sell the site or if you ever decide that you don't want to pay for inlinks anymore, it's a monthly subscription. The internal links stay there. So I didn't actually use in links for the internal linking on this side. I used Link Whisper because I knew that I was probably going to sell it pretty quick.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. I know with the Link Whisper, if you get rid of it, if you stop your annual payments, then you still have your links. They actually change in the database for you. So that's kind of a bummer to hear that they try to rope you in and say, "Hey, we're changing it back. You have to keep paying us."
Yeah,
Not cool. I don't know if that'll fly in the long term. But if the tool's good enough, of course, yeah, people will do it.
yeah,
But I mean, that's rough if people are like, you know what, I'm trying to, get started, like it's a smaller site or they're just a
yeah.
beginner or something like that. So, okay, very cool. So you added these internal links using Link Whisper. How many pages are on the overall site? I forgot to ask that at the beginning.
I think it was probably about 80 or 90. So I updated about 20%, like the top 20.
Okay, got it. And just roughly how many um, links did you have going to say the top 5 or 10 pages or something like that? Just how aggressive can we be for internal links?
Yeah, quite aggressive, I think, is the answer. Like way more aggressive than external links. And you can be a lot more aggressive on the anchor text too. Like Link Whisper is it's a little bit different now because it's hard to keep track of the anchor text that you build. But prior to Link Whisper, I used to do it, or I think we spoke about this last time I was on the show. I used to do all the internal linking via a spreadsheet, and it was easy to keep control of how many times you've said you've linked with certain anchor text. And my rule of thumb typically is 3 or 4 exact match, and then anything else then is partial match to a specific page. Um, so in all honesty, on a smallish site like this, it's highly unlikely that I would link to the same page more than 3 or 4 times, at least with an exact match.
Okay. Oh, really? That's much less aggressive than I expected. So, and how many, you really just said like 3 or 4 links to those top pages?
3 or 4 with exact match. So I still link to them, but not as exact match as the keyword that I want to that the page is primarily about. So if it's about skateboarding shoes, then 3 or 4 anchor texts which are exact skateboarding shoes, and then the rest then have to be something slightly different. They can be super skateboarding shoes or check out these shoes or something like that. But 3 or 4 is the max on exact that I try to go for.
Okay. And then the rest are some sort of partial match or longer phrase.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Gotcha. And a couple other things you added. So you added a physical address to the about page and you ordered 30 citations. So can you unpack that a little bit? I know some people may not be familiar with the details on that.
In all honesty, I don't know how impactful this part is. This is based on some advice from Matt Diggity. So some of Matt Diggity's videos where I know that he adds physical addresses and buys citations for his affiliate site. So it's one of the first times that I kind of done this. We've done it a little bit in the past with some expired domains we're working on to get them unstuck. But essentially, what it involves is I used a company called Web20 Ranker. They have a social fortress package and a citation package, and they basically build citation links, which are directory links. So like Yelp and all those kind of things. You have to portray it as a real business. You have to say, this is a business in this space, and this is the physical address, and this is the phone number. I cheated a little bit with the address in that I looked up FedEx locations, so businesses in the US which have where you can rent a PO box, and I basically just took that address and took the same phone number and changed the last digit, so it's not really a real address, but it does show up on a map as a real address. Um, and then I ordered the citations, and you put in the description about the business and the business logo and opening hours and all kinds of things to almost mimic that you're a real physical business with an actual location. And then from there, the hard part about citations is actually getting them indexed down. You think like a big directory like Yelp, how many people add in listings and businesses on there every day, like trying to get them indexed is quite difficult. I know that Matt recommended using like an indexing service, but I've seen in a couple of Facebook groups over the last 6 months that these indexing services are not quite working very well anymore. So I thought, well, I scratched my head a little bit for how else can I try and get these indexed, and that's the next point on the list was um, adding the citations in organizational schema and adding it to the about us page. So basically creating schema and saying that this website is about X, this is the URL, and also these are website or web addresses that are associated with us. Typically, you would mark up that schema with like social media profiles, but in this instance, I added the citation links instead.
Is it safe to say both the physical address on the About Us page, the citations, and then the organizational schema, you're not sure how much of an impact that had, right?
Yes, yeah, I honestly don't know.
Okay. And you and I had talked about this stuff off the record in a previous conversation, but yeah, I'm not sure either. I have seen, these ideas talked about and passed around for several years, like having the physical address, so Google thinks it's a real business, and all those other details. And I haven't checked it out or tested it in any fashion where I have any certainty either. But I know there's a small industry around doing these citations, and for local businesses it maybe makes a lot more sense. But anyway, we don't know is the point I'm trying to get across and emphasize here. We don't know about those things. We
No,
haven't
we've
tested
seen
this
it
in a
work on
study.
we've seen it work quite well on expired domains that seem to be stuck, like expired domains that don't take off the way that we would expect them to take off. And then we built some of these citations and added them that way. And they do seem to do better afterwards. Whether that's just time, like time passing, and it would have happened anyway, or whether it's this, like we haven't done a single variable test to see if it is this that's causing that change.
Next is advanced schema to the top 20 post around entity matching. And that's one of those things where I know all those words, but I really don't know what you mean by entity matching. So what's going on with that one?
So in all honesty, this is a tool from Inlinks. This is one of the things that they offer, and essentially what it does is say it basically marks up the page in terms that it's Google can't get confused about what the page is about. So, for example, if you have a page about Ford cars, you will literally mark up in the schema that this web page is the same as Ford, which is the same as, and then link to the Wikipedia page about Ford, the car brand, rather than Google may come on there and see the word Ford and may get confused, with maybe the actor Harrison Ford. So in unequivocal terms, you're literally saying to Google, this is the exact topic that this page is about. In all honesty, I hadn't come across this type of schema markup until I started playing with inlinks. So again, I have no idea if this had a major impact or not. But the more I looked into it and the more I started playing around with schema, I think the more you can mark up data and make it structured so Google understands it from a machine perspective, the better. So it's almost best practice to do.
Okay. That does make some sense. And you, again, looked at the top 20 posts, the top 25% or so, just to save time and hopefully get the most bang for your buck in the time. All right,
Yes,
very
that's
good.
it.
And one other thing I didn't ask at the beginning, you didn't do any link building, any external link building aside from the potentially the citations could be considered, some external links, but no proper skyscraper campaign, no guest posting campaign, nothing like that. And with the 38-day turnaround time, it would have been hard to do something big, and maybe you wouldn't have seen any benefits in the short term anyway. Now, how many links were going to this site? How authoritative was it just in general, if you can remember?
So it's a DR25. It has 501 referring domains to it.
Okay, 501 referring domains. That's a pretty good chunk. Do you think are those like pretty natural because the original owner was, in the industry and
Yeah,
pretty interested?
yeah. So the site's been around since around 2015. So it's a 6-year-old website. And in all honesty, looking at the link profile, it didn't seem that there was any attempt at building links. They all seem naturally acquired over 6 years, which is another plus when you're looking at a site like this. Yeah, it didn't. There was nothing untoward about the link profile.
Very cool. All right. Well, this is an amazing flip story in such a short time frame. About how much time did you spend on it if you had to estimate over the 38 days?
So in all honesty, aside from getting the content created, which our team did, all of the points we talked about literally took me a day. Like I did it in the evenings, but essentially it would have been about one full day's worth of work. So it took me a couple of evenings to do, but yeah, not a ton of time at all for the reward really, which is cool.
That's amazing. And for, I guess, as another baseline, like how much time, if you had to estimate, did your team work on any of the pieces that you didn't handle yourself?
So across 20 posts, we probably added around between 800 and 1,000 words. So probably looking at like up to 20,000 words of content. Like typically we would have that turned around in 4 weeks, and that would be formatted and uploaded and the schema added and everything. So, typically 4 weeks, but obviously I had to turn around a little bit quicker for my own project.
Sure.
And actually had them start work on it while I was doing the migration. So I knew that this is exactly what I wanted to do. So almost as soon as I had the website in my possession, I already had a chunk of the content ready to go.
And then finally, what was the trigger to sell it? So you said that you weren't planning on doing a quick turnaround. You didn't necessarily have any specific plan. So yeah, why were you thinking, hey, I'm going to sell this now?
In all honesty, it's just opportunity. So because I've bought and sold quite a few sites over the last couple of years, I have this network of individuals now who are interested in buying sites from me. And one reached out. He bought a couple of sites off me previously and reached out and said, "Do you have anything for sale?" And I said, "Well, I do, but it's not going to be on a 6 month average because I'm going to hold it to come up." And he said, "Okay, tell me a little bit more." And I told him the things that I changed and how the revenue had increased over the last 30 days up till this point. And I said, "But I'm, based on the last kind of 6 months revenue, I'm going to be looking at a 55x. Or if you take into consideration the work I've done and what the revenue is trending to do, I'll sell it to you for a more traditional multiple. But you've got to understand that you're buying it on, what will the work that I just put in rather than what the last 6 months look like." And he agreed. He looked at it and from a kind of an outsider perspective and saw what I'd done and saw the increase in RPMs and the increase in sessions and said, "Okay." Um, and that was that. There was no predetermined. I'm gonna sell it in a certain time. It was literally just opportunity. He messaged me at the right time, and I said okay.
How fast did you have the site over to this guy's account and migrated?
Yeah, really quick. So he's also a seasoned buyer. So he handled the migration. I literally gave him WordPress access and backup. So I used WPX for my hosting, gave him a backup. He had it changed literally the same day, and then because we'd done this is going to sound bad actually, but because we'd done deals in the past, we didn't use escrow, and we kind of trusted each other. We didn't want to pay the fees, and um, yeah, it was all done pretty quick. Like I sent over the details. He looked at them. He evaluated the site really quick. He's buying on behalf of a larger portfolio, so you have to get some sign off from those guys, which took another day or so, and then the money was transferred and the site was transferred pretty much the same week.
Very cool. Well, congrats. This is, like I said, an amazing story, quick turnaround time, and a couple, kind of cool things because you've done business with this person in the investment group or whatever portfolio management situation. Basically, you were able to turn it around quickly. They came
Yeah,
to you. They had trust with you. You didn't even use escrow, and
yeah,
you were able to turn it around really quickly and get really an outsized multiple for the historical information, but because you've done business together before, you're able to make such a deal, and he can see the work that you've done and the results from previous sites that he's purchased from you. So it all makes a lot of sense there. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks, Adam. Any other details that I forgot to ask you?
um, no, I don't think so. I guess maybe just a little bit about what actual difference those changes made to the RPM rate. So RPM increased essentially 25%. It went from an average of $15 up to, and this is session RPM. So there's a difference between session and page RPM in Mediavine. So session RPM went from around an average of 15 up to an average of 20, and page RPM went from an average of 12 to 13 up to 15, 16. So it's a good 25% increase in display ad RPM, which meant a higher multiple on the sale then.
Very awesome. All right. Well, where can people find you, Adam?
Probably two places. One is our website, nichewebsite.builders. There's a little chat icon on there. Like me and Mark pick those up ourselves directly. Or you can email us at team@nichewebsite.builders, and that comes directly to me. And I always reply to every one of those. So those are the best places, probably.
All right. And you guys have a podcast too, right?
Yes, we do. So we did a podcast recently where me and Mark spoke about our FAQ service and titled it "Why You Should Give a FAQ," which is a play on words. And we talk a little bit more about the process and kind of how we've developed that and the results we've seen. And yeah, it's you guys should check it out. It's on YouTube and all the other podcasting places, wherever they are, Spotify. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Adam. We do appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate your time.